Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Beandrea. I'm a film programmer here at UCLA Film and Television Archive. How many of you is this your first time coming out to the archive? All right, love to see that. And how many of you have been here many times before? All right, we love to see that as well. Welcome back and welcome. Um, this free screening, like all of our year-round programming, is made possible by the generosity of an anonymous donor and our partners here at The Hammer. Special thanks to our community partners for this series, the UCLA Department of English and Platform UCLA, for their continued support. Also want to give a huge shout out to our wonderful archive staff, without whom none of this would actually be able to happen. Our theater manager, Lauren Brown, our projectionist, Alex Blevins in the booth, and our student theater staff. Let's give them a little round of applause. So we have 4 more nights in this series. The next is a week from today, August 3rd, with the screening of In This Our Life, the Betty Davis starring film. Hattie McDaniel is actually also in it. And there will be a live reading on Baldwin's reflection on the film following the screening by the acclaimed actor Lisa Gay Hamilton. So a little housekeeping tonight. You're welcome to take photos, video before or after the screening, but please refrain during the films. Also, please silence and put away your phones and devices while the program is happening. If you'd like to share your experience, you can tag us at UCLA FTV Archive, UCLA FTV Archive on social media. You can also sign up for our newsletter at cinema.ucla.edu, and we're also on Letterboxd, so you can say you saw the film here if you wish. It does actually help us to have more programming like this when people talk about it online. And now for the film. So tonight we're screening Jack Conway's 1935 adaptation of A Tale of Two Cities, starring Ronald Colman as the disillusioned lawyer Sidney Carton, a role anchored by a final haunting moment of redemptive justice. The epic film came out when James Baldwin was just 11 years old. He had already read the Charles Dickens novel many times before his teacher, Bill Miller, took him to see the film on screen. Baldwin was especially moved by the film's striking ending, a moment he carried with him for the rest of his life. This program is one of many that have been happening this year as a part of the Baldwin Centennial. August 3rd, 2024 would have been James Baldwin's 100th birthday. A couple of months ago, I visited the Schomburg Center in Harlem, and I had the great pleasure of getting to read some of Baldwin's papers, specifically those related to his interest in film. The Schomburg acquired these materials from the Baldwin family in 2017. There in the archive, I found an early handwritten draft of The Devil Finds Work, and the section about A Tale of Two Cities was on a white legal pad. One paragraph reads, First read Tale of Two Cities. First read Tale of Two Cities when I was about 12 years old, and it had perhaps a crucial effect on my mind. With that book and Uncle Tom's Cabin, which I read much earlier, something seems to have suffered my mind's landscape. I don't know how to explain that, and perhaps I shouldn't try. That last line, I don't know how to explain that, and perhaps I shouldn't try, is actually crossed out in the notebook and didn't make it into the published book. I share it tonight because I think it reveals something essential about Baldwin, both as a writer and as a man. It shows how he wrestled with the blank page, how he deeply considered the power and the limits of language. So tonight's program includes a live dramatic reading of Baldwin's reflections on A Tale of Two Cities from his book-length essay, The Devil Finds Work. And you're in a treat tonight. This reading will be performed by author Roxane Gay, alongside journalist and podcast hosts Sam Sanders and Zach Stafford. And then the three of them will join me on stage for a brief Q&A directly afterward. So definitely stick around for that. You may have noticed when you came in, we've got post-it notes around, just inviting, if you wish to partake, you can write down any thoughts, reflections you might have, and if you turn them in, we might read them on stage. You don't have to put your name down. Our student theater staff will collect them. Don't be shy. And in closing, if you want to understand Baldwin, you can't just read him. You have to see him. You have to hear him. That's what Tracy Hucks, a renowned Baldwin scholar, said on the first day of her class, The Book of Baldwin. This was a class that I sat in on when I was doing a fellowship for journalists at Harvard University, and she teaches at Harvard Divinity School. Tonight, we get to do just that, to see and hear Baldwin in his own words, and to experience the force of his cinematic imagination through the voices of gifted performers. I programmed this evening because it's the kind of event I would want to attend as a film goer and as a critical thinker. If we're lucky, we might just walk out of here tonight with a glimpse of the truth of American cinema, as only James Baldwin could conjure it. So thank you and enjoy the program. And if you haven't already, please put your phone and devices away so we can enjoy the program together. Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm so happy to have you here for this hopefully unique evening. I wanted to just start off by telling us a little bit about your impressions of the film, or what moments kind of stood out, and then we'll talk about Baldwin a little bit. Do you want to start, Zach?
Yeah. So I've seen this film before. It's been a long time, but I got to watch it this time from my own personal point of view, in which I imagine I was James Baldwin at 12 years old. And in that moment, I realized that James Baldwin is definitely gay, because this film felt very gay for me tonight. Like the campy women who are being very bitchy to each other. I was reading Defarge and Sydney as lovers that could not be together.
He told me this backstage, and I was like, girl.
Oh. Like when you think of it, I was like, yeah, he's mad because like his girlfriend, that's his best friend, is marrying his love of his life, and this is why he's sacrificed. Anyway, so I had this whole like gay kind of like download on it, but in the film, you know, beyond my own like personal queer theory of it, it felt very like prescient in that like we're talking about revolution and people who are disenfranchised and what they're willing to do to have equity in this world, and it felt very important to watch today.
Yeah, I was really struck by how much my movie viewing eyes have gotten used to color movies with captions. And I'm like, Sam, got to work on that. But that's for me. I think in terms of how this work relates to James Baldwin, I'm fascinated that the person who began to show him the world of film was a white woman, Bill Miller. And I'm fascinated knowing that a lot of the ways in which he began to first see himself in art was through white people on a screen. And it reminds me that a lot of the people who we love and respect the most in history for their work on race and shining light on race, it is not out of a hate for white people. It is out of an understanding of whiteness. And so much of thinking about Baldwin in relation to this film, he's very good at separating white people from the pursuit of whiteness. And when he really looks at it, you know, I've read a part where he's talking about he felt like he could connect with, you know, the aristocrat's buggy that runs over the young boy, because that is bigger than black, it's bigger than white, it is oppressive and excessive capitalism. And that's what he's talking about. So that, for me, sticks out the most.
Roxane?
You know, what struck me in many ways was the sort of over-the-top performances, the melodrama of it all, and how everything was so extreme. But also when you really think about what was happening and the oppression and the sort of wretchedness of these lives and the need for revolution, is it really that melodramatic? Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that really stayed with me as I was watching the movie in the back and thinking about like, oh, wow, this is A Tale of Two Cities. But I was also thinking about how the film remains relevant even now, but also how this exemplifies what a great cultural critic can do. That James Baldwin could find intellectual fodder in a movie that most people, because we tend to not have a lot of nuance when we think about what we're capable of, most people would not think that this would be a film that he would be engaging with critically, and yet he is able to write an entire and brilliant essay about this film and what it reflects about our cultural values.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just to give a little bit of context on the film, so I think for me, the most impressive thing about it, or the most kind of thing that stands out to me, is obviously the revolution scene, the storming of the Bastille. But there were something like 17,000 extras, and this was shot on the MGM lot in Culver City entirely.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was no like Europe. It wasn't Europe. You know, that was just the day, the age where there were so many artisans, you know, involved in set making.
That's incredible.
And I think it's pretty impressive what they accomplished.
Now I'm just like, where in Culver City? I have to know the
Yeah.
cross street.
It's probably where Amazon has its lot now.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
a little too ironic.
Yeah. And Amazon now, you know,
Amazon.
owns
Yeah,
MGM.
there.
So
Yeah.
that's a whole other story. But yeah, I think that I just wanted to give a little bit of context on that. And to Roxane's point about you know, people wouldn't think necessarily that, you know, James Baldwin could write on this. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me is this idea that he saw himself in these films that were, you know, about white people. Like this whole series, most of the films are, you know, classic Hollywood and or films that, you know, feature white characters. And I wonder if you all have thoughts about that. Like, what is that? Where does that sit with you? Anyone can start.
Well, you know, it sits fine with me because we can only critique what exists. And it would be awesome if we could have a plethora of texts to engage with that were only done by people of color. Now, we're getting there, which is wonderful. But many of the issues that we contend with and that James Baldwin is engaging with in his especially cultural criticism are because of white people and the kinds of things that they have done to create the world that we're living in right now and the world that James Baldwin was living in that drove him to France instead of staying here in the United States. And so I actually don't have any kind of issue with it. I think that if we really want to understand who we are and how we have gotten to this place in the world, we have to understand it not only through our individual lenses, but through the lens of whiteness and white supremacy. We cannot set these things aside. And we have to also acknowledge that once in a while, there are some interesting texts made by white people.
I think what Baldwin is doing when he's able to, as a kid, understand how these pieces of art that are extremely white, how they can tie to him and his life and just relate to his life, that is the artistic ideal. The artistic ideal is to be, as a consumer of art, able to see yourselves in all kinds of different people, places, and things. I have a playlist that I never share with anybody. It's just for me. And it's a Spotify playlist of really sad heartbreak songs. And it's called White Women Who Have Made Me Cry. And it's just white women singing songs that have made me cry. And it's got Bonnie Raitt on there. It's got Caroline Rose on there. It's got some deep Sheryl Crow B-sides on there. And the point that playlist gets at for me, that what this movie gets at for Baldwin, is that like some of these larger themes are just larger themes. You get heartbreak on a sad playlist. You get the excess of aristocracy and the rich and the wealth beating down the poor from this movie, no matter what your color is. And so what makes Baldwin extra special is that he was able to see the universality of these themes while also talking about the whiteness wrapped up in it. He could do both at the same time. There's this moment that he writes where he talks about the mob. And he says, they were white, a white mob can be in no way reassuring to a black boy. So he gets that it's not for him, but he also gets that some of these themes are for everybody. That's just higher tier work,
Yeah.
and I respect it.
Yeah, and I think like I was listening to prep for today. I was re-listening to James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni in conversation in 1971. If you've not seen this, you can watch it on YouTube. It's incredible. But he talks a lot about beginnings in that conversation, and that we must begin somewhere. And I think it is really important and exciting that this film was where he decided to begin, because as he probably sat in that theater at 12 with a white woman that his father didn't like, as we learned from the essay, he felt distance there. And that distance was something he began to run towards, not away from. He lived in Harlem. His whole life was black, but he was sitting in a theater imagining white people fighting for revolution, and saw parts of himself in that, parts of his family in that. And then he began creating work that moved us closer to have a more intersectional approach. So I think I find it amazing that James Baldwin was willing to even engage with the work and say, this is where I'm beginning, and be upfront about it.
Yeah. And it's really, I'm struck by his use of the word dispossessed, and how he makes it apply to his life. He takes from it, and, he takes from the specific and makes it apply to his life, the universal of it. And I think that that's something, I'm always struck by the fact that, like, I feel like people of color are really used to reading themselves into texts where they're not necessarily there. Like, we're expert at that, right? Because obviously we had no choice as to not do that. This is an example of that. But the reverse is, I would say, rarely true.
The reverse is true, but not admitted to. My favorite statistic, growing up, I never watched Friends on NBC, but I knew who all of them were, and I knew what their plot points were. And I just assumed, well, like, this is, in the zeitgeist, and these white things are just popular because. But when I got older and began to look at entertainment as a journalist, I realized that all of the big black shows of my youth, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, The Cosby Show, I could go on, even now, Blackish, a lot of those shows had more white viewers than black viewers, When I think about the music that animated my youth, we all knew this statistic, the majority of rap in the 90s was bought by white teenage boys. And I think that the difference between Baldwin and some of what's happening there is that Baldwin celebrates talking about that difference and the universality that we can find by examining that. And I think a lot of people are sometimes afraid to admit what they're watching, what they're reading, and how it can tie to their lives. But they are. I mean, there's no way you're escaping a cornucopia of all kinds of culture when the entirety of the world's knowledge lives in your smartphone. But who is willing to engage with it publicly and talk about it? And that's Baldwin's challenge to us, I think.
Yeah. I want to open it up for questions and or reflections. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share, or any questions they want to ask the panel? There's a question over here, Lauren, to your left.
Thank you again for the program. Obviously, the last scene is, upsetting, shocking, whatever, but it really hit Baldwin. And can any of you interpret what you think really, got him about the last scene?
I mean, I think what strikes me about that scene is this kind of incredible moment that dignity can be accessed in kind of the worst moments of one's life, that you can live this horrid kind of controversial life of being a drunkard, being someone that people don't root for, want to be with, or even love. That's his issue, is that he wasn't chosen to be loved. And even by going through all of these things that people don't maybe love about you, you in this moment can make a choice and you can take back the control of your life. And I think Baldwin felt very disempowered by the world around him. Being a young black boy in New York, the world kind of made decisions for you through the systems that were oppressing him. And I think in these moments of this death that someone chose, he's like, oh, there are moments in life that I can kind of take the reins of my life and make it of my own if I decide to. Which is a big thought at 12, to like see this
Yeah.
death.
I was thinking, is this an appropriate movie for a 12-year-old?
I don't know.
I mean, I noticed, in the camera work, they don't show any of the guillotine.
No, yeah.
It's just, you see
Or-
them throwing the body
Or
over.
the stabbing is just all like left to the imagination.
Yeah.
I was thinking the whole time, I was like, how would they do this today? You'd see the head rolling.
Blood
You'd hear
See the
everywhere.
blood
Yeah.
dripping as the guillotine went back up.
Yes,
Yeah.
all of it. All of it.
But I would say also, if you revisit a lot of his books and think about the protagonists and how they die, he has a lot of protagonists that die in really awful ways sometimes. But thinking about that idea of dignity and death at the end of his own novels is interesting to explore.
Yes. Is there anyone else?
I believe down here in the front row.
Oh, yes. Please
One
wait for the
moment.
mic.
A microphone.
What I was going to say is that I remember when I was a kid, and I was born here in Los Angeles and have lived here all of my life, that how segregated the city was. There was a place in the city for every kind of race or religion or something, and now that doesn't exist anymore. And I don't think that there is segregation, or if there is any, it's very slight. Race, religion, gender doesn't make any difference. We're just all people.
I would love for that to be true. I
Tell us about Leimert Park.
I live in
He lives in Leimert
a
Park.
neighborhood that used to be historically black. Before that was historically Jewish. It's always been kind of Latino. I'm talking about Leimert Park. It's a neighborhood in South LA that was built by restrictive covenant. A lot of the things that you speak of that made cities like LA and most major American cities so siloed by race, it's because it was written into the law, segregated, separated. That's not gone yet. I know parts of town where I can drive where the people look like this over here and that over there. And I think particularly when it comes to things like where we send our children to school, we've actually resegregated our children. A child is more likely now to go to a school where most of their classmates are the same race as them than they were in the 1970s. Yeah, so I think what your comment is making me think of is that part of what Baldwin is asking in his criticism, in his discussion of films like these, is for us to reach towards an artistic empathy that can see a world and reality that we might not see. We build lives that speak to our ideals, and perhaps our personal lives are fully integrated, but that is not yet the reality for most of this city, most of this country, most of this world. And so my hope is that this ideal of artistic curiosity and empathy can lead us to examine these things. But I don't think the work is done yet.
Well, I want to close with one last question, which is about revolution.
Happy Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, there's that scene where they're giving the meat to the dogs, and that sort of kicks things off. Sometimes it kind of feels like that today, not in those stark terms, right? But it doesn't feel too far off from where we are today. And so I guess my question is about sort of what was it like for you to watch that whole sequence of the revolution and the storming of the Bastille, and does it have any echoes for you in terms of today?
I would say beyond the Bastille moment, the aristocrats at the party, I think doing drugs. He kept touching his nose. I think there was cocaine. Wild. I was like, whoa.
was from the
lot of
monkey.
bumps happening up here. That to me felt so like right now. Like there are so many moments in culture that we see where like hyper wealthy people are like together, you know, maybe having a wedding in Venice where they've shut down everything and bragging about it and acting like, you know, people aren't starving or wars aren't literally happening down the waterway in which they are. So I think the film really captures the like laissez-fairness of the aristocracy right now, that like, oh, this won't happen. They won't organize. They won't fight back. And I feel like that is quite the bet to make right now, because I see people that are very, very desperate. Things feel very desperate at the moment.
You know, I agree. We were. The reason I'm late is because I just flew in from Vegas, where I saw Beyonce again, and we were staying at a nice hotel, and it was so interesting to see the stark contrast, to see how much this place was packed, people in and out, gambling, and acting like there's nothing going on, there's nothing wrong. And that's just small scale. We're not, you know, let alone the Bezoses of the world and the people who go to Sun Valley and, you know, have billionaire summer camp. They really do believe that they are insulated from the worries and the concerns and the genuine fears of the wretched or the rest of us. And what strikes me in the film is that there was this tipping point. And as I look at the world today, I keep wondering, are we going to have a tipping point? Because I think a lot of people, especially in a Western context and in an American context, a lot of people are very, very comfortable because nothing yet has really disrupted their lives. We read the news, oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's so sad. But I don't know that it has hit home for people. We read about the tariffs, but we know that it's not really going to affect prices in an intense way until 2027. We hear about the big bullshit bill, and we think, oh, okay, we can at least, you know, mitigate some of these issues. And we see more and more fascism encroaching upon us, and a lot of people seem real comfortable. But what is that tipping point? And so while the aristocracy do believe that they're immune, part of me wonders, like, are they right? Because the fact that we haven't had a tipping point yet, given everything that's happening, I mean, Gaza alone, like, there's no tipping point here. I don't know. I hope, though.
Yeah.
I really do hope.
I love that you bring that up, because that scene where the wine explodes in the beginning and people are literally drinking from the ground, and you have the parent or the grandparent saying, here to the child, drink this, this is food, was like, oh, there's no aspiration in that moment, which is what you're pointing at, is that people aren't fighting back very in a revolutionary style right now, because they're like, oh, I could one day make a lot of money on crypto, or I could go viral, and I could fight. I could become that one day. And
that's why they don't tax billionaires.
Exactly.
Because there's this mass American delusion
One day it could be me.
one day I might be a billionaire and I don't want to pay those taxes.
Yeah, and that was not on the screen tonight.
Yeah.
Like, none of those people were like, I one day will become the aristocrats. They were like, tear it all down. And I agree, that's not the vibe at the moment.
And this is the beauty of Baldwin's criticism. He knew from the start that this American dream was in many ways a farce, and not made for him, not written for him. And like the way that he could assess culture, he removed himself from the, well, one day it might be me as a billionaire. He was never doing that.
Yeah.
He knew which side he was always on.
Yeah. Thank you.